Once upon a time, in a world that exists just beyond the very last star you see before you close your eyes, there was a place known as the Kingdom of Whispering Clouds. This wasn't an ordinary kingdom made of cold stone and heavy iron. Oh no, little one. This kingdom was built entirely out of the softest, pinkish, and most golden clouds you could ever imagine. In this magical place, the ground felt like walking on a giant, warm marshmallow, and the trees didn't have leaves, they had shimmering silver ribbons that hummed a gentle lullaby every time the breeze brushed past them. In the heart of this kingdom lived a small, brave explorer named Oliver. Oliver had curly hair that looked a bit like a cloud itself and a pair of bright green eyes that were always looking for wonder. He wore a velvet cape the color of the midnight sky, dotted with tiny glowing buttons that looked just like real stars. Oliver's best friend wasn't a person or a dog, but a tiny, glowing dragon named Pip. Pip was no bigger than a teapot, and instead of breathing fire, he breathed out tiny, sparkling bubbles that smelled like lavender and sweet vanilla. One evening, as the giant, sleepy sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and apricot, Oliver and Pip noticed something very strange. The great sleepy willow, the most magical tree in the entire kingdom, wasn't glowing. Usually, the sleepy willow's branches would droop down and touch the cloud ground, sending out a soft, pulsing light that helped every child in the world fall into sweet dreams. But tonight, the tree looked dim. Its silver ribbons were silent. "Oh, Pip," Oliver whispered, his voice soft so as not to wake the nearby sleeping butterflies. "If the sleepy willow doesn't glow, the dreams might get lost on their way to the children. We have to find the golden key of morning dew to wake the magic back up." Pip let out a small, worried squeak and blew a lavender bubble that floated up and popped against Oliver's nose. They knew the journey would be long, but they also knew they had enough courage in their little hearts to light up the whole sky. They began their journey by walking across the Bridge of Giggles. This bridge was made of frozen rainbows, and the only way to cross it was to think of the funniest thing that ever happened to you. Oliver thought about the time Pip tried to sneeze and accidentally launched himself backward into a pile of soft feathers. As Oliver chuckled, the bridge began to glow with a brilliant, multicolored light, guiding their path. Beneath the bridge, the river of songs flowed, carrying melodies of flutes and harps that made Oliver's feet feel light and bouncy. As they reached the other side, the air began to sparkle with stardust motes. These were tiny, living lights that loved to play hide and seek. "Excuse me, little lights," Oliver asked politely. "Have you seen which way the path to the crystal caverns goes?" The lights danced around them, forming a glowing arrow that pointed toward the forest of velvet shadows. "Now, don't let the names scare you, for the shadows here were soft and warm, like a cozy blanket pulled up to your chin." In the forest, the trees were tall and wise. They didn't speak with words, but by rustling their velvet leaves. Oliver reached out and patted a trunk, feeling the warmth of the magic flowing through the wood. Suddenly, a wise old owl named Hootglow descended from a high branch. Hootglow had feathers that shimmered like pearls. "To find the magic you seek, young young explorer," the owl hooted softly, "you must follow the scent of the moonflowers. They only bloom for those who carry kindness in their pockets." Oliver checked his pockets. He didn't have flowers, but he did have a small piece of blue ribbon he had saved to fix Pip's favorite toy. He realized that kindness wasn't something you carried, it was something you were. He took a deep breath, and suddenly, the path ahead began to smell like fresh rain and blooming jasmine. The moonflowers began to open their petals, acting like tiny lanterns along the mossy floor. They walked deeper into the forest, where the grass was so soft it felt like velvet slippers. Pip stayed close to Oliver's shoulder, his tiny glow illuminating the path. They encountered a family of cloud bunnies, who were busy knitting sweaters out of moonlight. The bunnies hopped over and gave Oliver a small, glowing tuft of wool. "This will keep your heart warm when the air gets chilly near the mountain," they whispered in voices that sounded like tinkling bells. As they moved forward, the forest began to thin, revealing the base of the Sparkletop Mountain. The mountain didn't look steep or gray, it looked like a giant pile of sugar diamonds, reflecting the light of the rising moon. "We're almost there, Pip," Oliver encouraged his little friend. "The crystal caverns are just halfway up, and that's where the magical essence of the kingdom is kept." The climb was easy, for the mountain itself seemed to help them. Whenever Oliver felt a bit tired, a small gust of warm wind would gently push him upward, and the stones under his feet felt as steady as a giant's hand. They reached the entrance of the cavern, which was draped in curtains of glowing ivy. As they stepped inside, the sound of the forest faded, replaced by the gentle, rhythmic drip-drop of magical nectar falling into clear, glowing pools. Inside the cave, the walls were lined with dream amethysts. These purple crystals held the memories of happy days, afternoons spent eating ice cream, mornings of opening presents, and evenings of being tucked in by someone who loves you. Oliver felt a wave of peace wash over him. He knew they were close. At the far end of the cave, sitting on a pedestal of pure light, was a small, ornate chest. But as they approached, they realized the chest was guarded by a sleeping giant. But this wasn't a mean giant. It was a dream guardian, a massive creature made of soft wool and starlight, snoring loudly. Each snore sent a puff of glitter into the air. Oliver knew they had to be very, very quiet. He looked at Pip, and Pip nodded, holding his breath so he wouldn't blow any bubbles. They crept forward, inch by inch, their feet making no sound on the crystal floor. Oliver reached the pedestal. His heart hammered gently in his chest like a little bird. He reached out his hand, his fingers almost touching the cold, magical silver of the chest. Just then, the dream guardian shifted in his sleep, mumbling something about extra sprinkles on his cloud cake. Oliver froze. He waited until the guardian's breathing became deep and steady again. With a slow, steady hand, Oliver lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of silk, was the golden key of morning dew. It was even more beautiful than the story said, pulsing with a warm, golden light that felt like a hug. As Oliver took the key, the entire cavern began to hum with a low, beautiful frequency. The magic was reacting to the key being found. But their journey was only half over. They had to get the key back to the sleepy willow before the moon reached the very top of the sky. Oliver tucked the key safely into his star-buttoned cape, and together with Pip, they turned to head back out into the night, ready for the next part of their magical adventure. As Oliver's fingers closed around the golden key of morning dew, the cave didn't just glow, it began to sing. The dream amethysts on the walls vibrated with a sound like 1,000 tiny silver bells ringing at once. Oliver tucked the key deep into his velvet pocket, feeling its warmth spread through his entire body. He looked at Pip, whose tiny wings were fluttering with excitement, scattering lavender-scented glitter all over the crystal floor. "We have it, Pip," Oliver whispered, his heart dancing. "Now we just have to get it back to the sleepy willow before the midnight moon reaches its peak." They turned away from the sleeping dream guardian, moving as silently as a thought. But as they reached the mouth of the cavern, they realized the path back wouldn't be the same as the path they came. In the kingdom of whispering clouds, the landscape loved to change its shape, especially when magic was on the move. Where there had been a simple mossy slope, there was now the labyrinth of floating lilies. Imagine, little one, a vast lake of liquid starlight, and floating upon it were giant, glowing lily pads the size of dinner tables. To get across, they couldn't just walk, they had to hop from one lily pad to the other. But here was the magical part, each lily pad only stayed still if you whispered a secret wish to it. Oliver stepped onto the first one. It wobbled like jelly. "I wish," Oliver whispered softly, "that every child has a warm bed tonight." Immediately, the lily pad turned a sturdy emerald green and stood perfectly still. Pip hopped onto his shoulder, and they jumped to the next one. "I wish for infinite chocolate chip cookies," Pip seemed to squeak in his own dragon way, and that lily pad turned a delicious shade of chocolate brown. As they reached the middle of the lake of starlight, the water began to ripple. Out of the glowing depths rose the silver swan of silence. She was magnificent, with feathers made of woven moonlight and eyes like polished sapphires. She didn't speak, for her job was to protect the quiet of the night. She looked at the golden key glowing in Oliver's pocket and bowed her long, elegant neck. With a gentle push of her wing, she created a soft breeze that carried Oliver and Pip's lily pad all the way to the other shore in the blink of an eye. "Thank you, beautiful swan," Oliver called out, waving his star-buttoned cape. The swan let out a single, melodic note that sounded like a cello, and then vanished back into the starlight. Now, they found themselves at the edge of the whispering high grass steppes. Here, the grass grew as tall as sunflowers, and each blade was a different color of the rainbow. As they walked through, the grass brushed against them, whispering encouraging words. "You're doing great," whispered a blade of blue grass. "Almost there, brave Bedurin, brave explorer," murmured a stalk of yellow gold. It felt like being hugged by 1,000 soft voices. Suddenly, a playful cloud puff bounced across their path. It looked like a ball of white cotton candy with big, curious eyes. This was Barnaby, the messenger of the clouds. "The moon is climbing fast," Barnaby chirped, bouncing so high he almost hit the stars. "If you want to make it to the Sleepy Willow in time, you'll need to take the shortcut of shimmering echoes." Barnaby led them to a place where the air looked like a giant, swirling bubble. "Just step inside and think of the Sleepy Willow's roots," he instructed. Oliver took a deep breath, grabbed Pip tightly, and stepped into the swirl. For a moment, it felt like they were flying through a tunnel of silk and rainbows. They saw flashes of other magical places, the candy cane canyons, the ocean of orange juice, and the mountains of marshmallows. Then, with a soft pop, they landed gently on a pile of soft, blue feathers. They were back in the forest of velvet shadows, but they were much closer to the center of the kingdom now. However, the air had grown cooler, and the dimness of the great Sleepy Willow was starting to affect the whole forest. The moonflowers were beginning to close their petals, and the butterflies were shivering in their sleep. "We have to hurry, Pip," Oliver said, his voice filled with determination. But just as they started to run, they encountered a group of misty sprites. These tiny creatures were made of fog and starlight, and they loved to play games. They were dancing in a circle, blocking the path. "To pass the sprites, you must solve their riddle," Barnaby the Cloud Puff shouted from behind them. The lead sprite, a shimmering girl with wings like dragonfly silk, stepped forward. "I have no voice, but I can tell you stories. I have no bed, but I dream all day. I have no wings, but I can take you anywhere. What am I?" Oliver thought hard. He looked at the golden key, then at the sleeping forest, and then he thought about the children waiting for their dreams. "A book!" Oliver shouted happily. "You are a book!" The sprites cheered, their voices sounding like the fizz of a soda bottle. They broke their circle and turned into a glowing trail of mist, showing Oliver the fastest way through the trees. As they ran, the golden key in Oliver's pocket grew brighter and warmer, as if it knew it was getting closer to home. They finally broke through the tree line and saw it, the great Sleepy Willow. It looked so sad in the dim light, its long, silvery branches trailing on the ground like tired arms. The midnight moon was just a hair's breadth away from the very top of the sky. "There it is!" Oliver cried out. But between them and the tree was the moat of melodies. The water in the moat wasn't made of liquid, it was made of pure music. To cross it, you had to hum a tune that came straight from your heart. Oliver closed his eyes. He didn't think about a song he had heard before. He thought about the feeling of a warm hug, the smell of cookies baking, and the sound of a soft rain on the roof. He began to hum a low, sweet melody. As he hummed, the music in the moat rose up and formed a solid bridge of golden notes. Oliver and Pip ran across, their footsteps creating little ping and pong sounds like a xylophone. They reached the base of the great sleepy willow just as the moon touched the highest point of the heavens. Oliver pulled the golden key from his pocket. It was pulsing so strongly now it was hard to hold. He saw a small, keyhole-shaped knot in the trunk of the willow, right at the level of his heart. "Together, Pip," Oliver said. Pip placed his tiny, glowing paw on top of Oliver's hand. Slowly, carefully, they pushed the golden key of morning dew into the tree. For a second, everything went completely silent. The wind stopped. The sprites held their breath. Even the moon seemed to pause in the sky. And then, a tiny spark of gold appeared where the key met the wood. That tiny spark of gold didn't stay tiny for long. As Oliver and Pip turned the golden key, a warm, radiant light erupted from the heart of the great sleepy willow. It wasn't a bright, stinging light like the midday sun. It was a soft, honey-colored glow that felt like the sun's last hug on a summer evening. The silver ribbons on the branches began to shimmer and dance, and the silence was replaced by a beautiful, low hum, the sound of the world's dreams waking up. "Look, Pip!" Oliver shouted, though his voice was soft with awe. The light traveled up the trunk, through every twisting branch, and out to the very tips of the willow's leaves. As the glow touched the leaves, they released millions of tiny, glowing, dream seeds. These seeds looked like dandelion puffs made of pure starlight. They floated up into the air, caught by a gentle, warm breeze that smelled like fresh linen and toasted marshmallows. The dream seeds didn't just stay in the kingdom. They began to drift upward, higher and higher, passing the midnight moon and traveling through the velvet sky toward the world of children. Oliver watched as they moved like a river of diamonds. One seed was for a little girl who wanted to fly on a Pegasus, another was for a little boy who wanted to build a castle made of giant building blocks. Each seed carried a story, a laugh, and a feeling of perfect safety. As the magic returned to the kingdom of whispering clouds, the entire land transformed. The bridge of giggles sparkled brighter than ever, and the river of songs began to play a lullaby so sweet that even the stones seemed to relax. The wise owl, Hoot-Glow, flew over and landed gently on a branch above Oliver's head. "You have done it, brave ones," he hooted, his eyes twinkling like stars. "The magic is restored because you remembered that the greatest power of all is a heart that cares for others." Oliver felt a great wave of sleepiness wash over him. His journey had been long, through the forest of velvet shadows and over the lake of starlight. He sat down at the base of the now glowing sleepy willow, leaning his back against its warm, vibrating bark. Pip curled up in the crook of Oliver's arm, his tiny dragon tail twitching as he began to purr like a happy kitten. But the adventure wasn't quite over. As Oliver's eyes began to heavy, a small, silver leaf drifted down from the tree and landed right in his palm. On the leaf, glowing in tiny letters, was a message: "For the one who protects the dreams of others, the most magical dream of all awaits." Oliver smiled. He felt the cloud ground beneath him become even softer, like a giant feather bed. He looked up at the moon, which was now smiling down at the kingdom, satisfied that its work was done. The air was filled with the sound of 1,000 tiny harps, playing so softly you could only hear them if you were truly, truly relaxed. Far away, in the world of people, children were beginning to turn over in their beds, tucking their chins under their covers and smiling in their sleep. They didn't know about Oliver, or Pip, or the golden key, but they felt the warmth of the magic in their hearts. They felt safe. They felt loved. And they knew, deep down, that tomorrow would be a wonderful day. Back in the kingdom, Barnaby the Cloud Puff bounced over and placed a tiny blanket made of woven mist over Oliver's shoulders. The Dream Guardian from the cave walked by on his tiptoes, carrying a lantern filled with captured starlight to make sure no one's sleep was interrupted. Everything was exactly as it should be. Oliver's breathing became slow and steady. He thought about the bridge of giggles, the silver swan, and the kind sprites. He realized that the magical part of the kingdom wasn't just the glowing trees or the floating lilies, it was the fact that everyone worked together to make sure the world was a happy, peaceful place. "Good night, Pip," Oliver whispered, his voice barely a breath. Pip let out one last, tiny lavender bubble that floated up and joined the stars. "Good night, kingdom of whispering clouds," Oliver thought. And then, with the scent of lavender and vanilla in the air, and the gentle hum of the sleepy willow in his ears, Oliver drifted off into the most beautiful dream he had ever had. In his dream, he was flying through the stars, holding hands with all the children of the world, and everywhere they went, they left a trail of golden starlight behind them. The great sleepy willow continued to glow, its branches swaying like a mother's arms, guarding the sleep of every living thing. The moon moved slowly across the sky, watching over the silent kingdom and the sleeping boy. And as the stars twinkled one last time before the dawn, the whole world whispered a single, quiet word. "Sweet dreams."